Today's Algebra Nation video will cover workbook page 94, problem square root 25. And hopefully you're paying attention during these podcasts and being like a superhero so you can get a $3.99 or higher on the EOC. All right, which one of you from Heat Nation out there have been messing around on my computer? Because I can take a lot of teasing, but if I find out who did this, it's going to be like minus 10,000. This is redonkulous. I don't care what you say. He is not a superhero. To our regularly scheduled program. Thank you.
Tiffany is going down the path. 4x minus 2y equals 16. Get 4x minus 2y equals 16. Tammy's going down the path. That's represented by 4x plus 4y equals 28. We want to figure out at what point do they cross. What is the value of x and y that they have in common? Now, what method do we use to solve our system and why? Well, when I'm looking at these two equations, what do we think is the easiest way to solve? Remember, we use substitution when one of your variables is already by itself. Is x or y by itself in either of these equations? No. So substitution would probably be a little bit difficult. What about elimination? What do we do when we use elimination? We combine our two equations together so we can eliminate a variable. Well, in order to do that, we need a negative value and a positive value to cancel out and equal 0. Well, if I add 4x and 4x together, that gives me 8x. If I add negative 2y and 4y together, that gives me 2y. Nothing cancels out to be 0. But I can do something about that. What can we do? How can we change this first equation so that one of our variables will cancel out? Let's multiply everything by negative 1. Right, when we multiply by negative 1, what happens? That'll become a negative 4x, and a negative 4x plus a positive 4x will cancel out and be 0. So what we're going to do is multiply the entire top equation by negative 1. Everything has to be multiplied by negative 1. Well, when you multiply by negative 1, essentially what you're doing is changing the sign. So negative 1 times 4x would be a negative 4x. Negative 1 times negative 2y, well, a negative times a negative gives us a positive. So we'll have a positive 2y. A negative 1 times a positive 16, negative times a positive, we get a negative. So we're going to end up with negative 16. Well, now that I've rewritten my first equation, I just rewrote it here, now I'm ready to combine these two equations. What's going to happen? My x variable is going to be eliminated. That will let me solve for y. And once we get y, we can go on and solve for x. So 4x minus 4x, well, those cancel out and we get 0. 4y plus 2y. Well, 4 plus 2 gives us 6y. 28 minus 16. Well, we're going to get a positive value because 28 is bigger than 16. Let's see what we get. 8 minus 6 gives us 2. 2 minus 1 gives us 1. We end up with 12. So we have 6y equals 12. Well, now we just solve for y. Let's divide both sides by 6. Because remember, 6 times y was the opposite of multiplication. What's the inverse? Division. So we divide each side by 6. 6 over 6, those cancel out. So we get y equals 12 divided by 6 is equal to 2. Are we done? Nope. We still need to get that value of x. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's start with our first equation that we had. We have 4x minus 2y equals 16. Well, if we know that y is equal to 2, we're just going to plug in that value of 2 and see what x is equal to. Well, if we're plugging in the value of 2, we get 4x minus 2, wherever we see a y, we put a 2, equals 16. Well, let's see what we get. 4x minus, what's a negative times a positive? It's a negative. 2 times 2 is 4 equals 16. Well, now what do we do? I have 4 being subtracted from 4x, so to get rid of it, I'm going to add 4. I'm going to add 4 to both sides of my equation. Negative 4 plus 4, those cancel out. So we get 4x equals, what's 16 plus 4? 16 plus 4 is 20. Well, now we just solve for x. What do? Divide by 4. Right, when we divide by 4, that means that the 4 divided by 4 is going to cancel out and be 1. So we have x by itself. And what's 20 divided by 4? 20 divided by 4 is equal to 5. So guess what? We have our value of x. We have our value of y. What's the solution to this system of equations? Well, it's our point x comma y. This is the point where their two paths cross. This is where Tiffany and Tammy's paths cross. The x point is 5, and your y point is 2. Now remember, you can always check your answer. What you want to do, look at your second equation. Plug in 5 for x, plug in 2 for y, and make sure that your left side of the equation equals your right side of the equation. Always good to check your work whenever you're doing algebra problems. If you guys have any questions on these, just post them on the wall.